This is Tarheel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
The Lebanese in North Carolina project was established in 2010 to research, preserve, and to publicize the history of Lebanese American communities both in North Carolina and in the South. And joining me now to tell us more about this project and how it all came about is Dr. Moise Khayrallah, founder of the Lebanese in North Carolina project and chair of the advisory board of the Khayrallah program. Also with us is Dr. Akram, Khater, director of the Khayrallah program for Lebanese American Studies at North Carolina State University. That's a mouthful. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the invitation.
Now, Dr. Khayrallah, you were the founder of this project. What was the impetus for creating a project like this?
There are two dimensions to my decision to fund the program and also be involved with it. The first one has to do with my being an American of Lebanese descent and my valuing both parts of my culture and my identity, having spent half of my life in Lebanon, half of my life here. There are dimensions that I highly value in those two settings. And I've been endeavoring since I moved here to really be a link between those two cultures because I feel that both have very valuable aspects that bear highlighting. And I've done that throughout the years I've been here. I felt over the last few years that it would be good to raise this to a much more serious and academic level and talked to Dr. Khater about that, and we came up with the program. So I was very happy to see that materialize. The second dimension for my decision really has to do with my feeling and my belief that this place, North Carolina and the United States in general, is a great place because of the presence of people from various cultures all around the world. We are really a country with a mix of all these cultures, all of these entrepreneurial spirits that have come from various parts of the world. And I'm hoping that by highlighting my culture and by highlighting this aspect of my life, it will prod others to also do the same and then really showcase what a great place this is and how in the future it will continue being that because of the presence of these various cultures here.
Okay. So you involved Dr. Khater in this project. How did it sort of take root?
Well, it was basically really Dr. Khater's just thinking about what's the best way. I came to him with this vague idea about we need to do something to highlight our culture, and he had the answer. He really, having been a professor of history, having really thought a lot about this way of highlighting cultures and of bringing oral history to life, he had the right ideas, and I've been elated with the progress we've made so far.
Let's talk a little bit about the progress that's been made so far. What are some of the things that this project has done?
If I can take a step back before I get to the particulars and to follow up on Dr. Khayrallah's point, one of the things that we also thought about very clearly is that after 9/11, our presence as Lebanese Arabs in this country was really kind of tainted by the story that was told about us, that we are in essence associated with terrorism, without ipso facto. So it just simply because we are of that general area, we were equated with the act of violence against the United States. So that's one problem. And the second problem, of course, was that we appear to be like alien to the values and the morals of this country, and that we are newcomers and marginalized at that. So one of the things that we aim to do together, as we had many conversations about this, is we wanted to show that this community, the Lebanese community and the Arab American community in general, is part of American history. It's a much longer part that has been around much longer than 9/11. It has contributed to the American values. As Moise said, we have been part of the American dream. We have built America for over a century. And so we wanted to bring that to life. So the way to do that, and this is where we put our heads together, we came up with these ideas, is to document the history of this community in North Carolina at first as a pilot project, with the hope that it's going to expand to the southeast and then beyond that to the United States. So the notion is that we were going to go around and collect the stories of people who are fourth and third and second and first generation Lebanese Americans in North Carolina. It is twofold really. First, it's for the community itself to have those stories, and second, that we can share those stories and the story of the community with the general public and North Carolina. So that's what we did. We set about interviewing people across the state, all the way from the coast to the mountains, because that's where you see this community spread all across. And on the basis of that research, on the basis of also archival research into Ellis Island records, into naturalization records, into old photographs, newspapers, what have you, we were able to do the first stage of the project, which is a documentary film. And the second stage we have just launched, which is an online archive that houses all this material we've been collecting, and that we will keep adding to it with the years to come. And that just went live on Monday, actually. And the third one is a museum exhibit that will open February 2014.
Okay. And you all have been collecting, you talked about archival material, countless photographs from Lebanese American families, and you're sharing those with the public as well.
That is indeed the case. In fact, you know, that's one of the things that, in many ways, the families themselves may have had a treasure trove of photographs that they had been putting to the wayside. And as we go and approach people, we are encouraging them to go dig through these things. Old Arabic Bibles. We have encountered objects that have been sitting collecting dust. And all these materials we have been able to scan and put on the archive.
Dr. Khayrallah, you mentioned the importance, or how important it is for you to share Lebanese American history with the citizens of North Carolina and eventually across the country. Why was it important for you to share it in this way and to create this avenue for sharing that information? And what do you hope that the American people or that North Carolinians learn from this project?
We do share our culture through various means. For example, the Lebanese community here has a club that's very active in the local international festival and other places. There is a local church. There are other places of worship that are frequented by Lebanese and Lebanese Americans. So there are other means where we share our culture. I felt that teaming up with Dr. Khater and doing the program at NC State gives it a completely different dimension that's much more permanent and much more, if you want, effective in really spreading the message all across the state. Because NC State itself, being in Raleigh, and Dr. Khater's presence in the history department really gives it a cachet of importance to what we're doing. The fact that we were able to generate a DVD, for example, out of all of the collected histories is a major program, and it really is, we're very proud of it. We now have it outside. People can buy it, can look at it. So it gave, teaming up with Dr. Khater and NC State, gave it a completely different dimension than what we have been able to do so far. We are still active on all the other fronts. We love our culture, sharing it. We participate in all the festivals around here. We love the dancing, the food. All of that is really great and important, but this is really a whole different level. And I'm very grateful for Dr. Khater to have really conceived of how we could bring it to that level.
Absolutely. Dr. Khater, how can people find out more information about the project and maybe access some of the information that you have available?
Sure. So we have two websites. The first one is really the main website that we have that just went live on Monday, and that's our online archive, and it's nclebanese.org. So it's really quite straightforward. And there they will be able to browse a collection of photos and documents that we have. We also have videos, home movies, interviews. We have audio, early Arab American music that is from the 1910s and 20s. So they can access all of these things, browse through them. We have an amazing blog that the assistant director has been keeping, and it's just a fantastic blog that teaches them about how to use this. So that's one. We have the documentary that is also, they can, as Dr. Khayrallah was saying, they can link to and purchase it online through that website.
Okay.
And we will always be announcing news about what we're doing through this, because we will have activities throughout the year into next year.
Okay, and that website is nclebanese.org.
That is correct.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Dr. Khayrallah, thank you so much for sharing your work, and thank you for doing this project and being our guest today.
It's my pleasure.
All right. We'll be back with more on the Lebanese in North Carolina project when Tarheel Talk continues. Today's show focuses on Lebanese American history in North Carolina and efforts to preserve and publicize it. With us again is Dr. Akram Khater, director of the Khayrallah program for Lebanese American Studies at NC State. Also joining us is Caroline Muglia, the assistant director of the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
me.
Thank
you.
Now, you mentioned that a key component of this project is a documentary entitled Cedar in the Pines. Cedar in the Pines. Caroline, tell us a little bit about this documentary, and then we'll take a look at some
Sure. So this documentary really chronicles the 120 plus years of the Lebanese American experience in North Carolina. And so it's sort of called Cedars in the Pines because it is really rooted in North Carolina and the contributions that the Lebanese community has made in North Carolina. But of course it brings us back to Lebanon, right? The Cedars portion, and where it all came from. Why did people leave in the waves of immigration, and when they left, and what they did once they got here. And of course it relies on the oral histories and testimonies that we took from the community, along with photographs and home videos, letters and heirlooms that the community has so generously donated to the project.
Okay, and you've brought along a couple of clips. We want to talk about this very first clip. Is this something that kind of gives the idea of why some people left and what they did once they got here?
Exactly. So this first clip is a a couple of images of Ellis Island, and then focuses on two community members, Mitchell Mack and Philip Bador, recounting the experiences of their ancestors as they arrived in North Carolina.
Okay, let's take a look at that.
Being the gutsy person he was, he leaves his wife and family of 5 children, not able to speak a word of English, comes to America, comes through Ellis Island. And how he made it, I don't know, but anyway, the clerk asked him his name and so forth, what was registering, and he says, my name is Hanna Mahul Fahoudi. Well, they knew Hanna was John. Got to Mahul, they put down M-A-C-K, and Fahoudi never got in the ball game at all. So we got named by a clerk at Ellis Island.
They ended up on the railroad, the Wilmington-Weldon Railroad, going to Wilmington to see someone about buying stock. It was their plan to sell stock as peddlers. And this railroad passed through Goldsboro, and it stopped in Goldsboro, and they got out and they met people, and they liked what they saw, and they decided to come back here and to settle.
Okay, and that is an excerpt from the documentary Cedar in the Pines. And I think if anyone follows North Carolina politics, they could recognize former state legislator Philip Bador in that piece. But what this shows is the rich history of the Lebanese American community here in North Carolina, and the contributions they've made. Talk a little bit about that history and why people left Lebanon and came to the U.S.
Sure. So there are really 2 waves of migrations of folks that came from what we know today as Lebanon to North Carolina. The first wave is from about 1890 to 1930. And this is Philip Badur's ancestors come from that. And there are about 1,000 of them that arrived at that point. And then the second wave comes after 1975, when there's a civil war in Lebanon. And we have now about 15,000 members of citizens of North Carolina who are of Lebanese descent. Now, the early wave of immigrants, when they arrived here, the first things that they started doing, they didn't, as Mitchell Mack was saying, they didn't speak the language. And the first things that they did was they went around with small suitcases, sometimes large suitcases, selling and peddling wares to farmhouses as well to small towns. And from that start, they moved on to dry goods stores, and then ultimately you have clothing stores. So like the Cannon clothing stores that you have in Wendell, now it's moving to Cameron Village. Some of them went into the food business. So Food Lion, one of the original founders of Food Lion, is of Lebanese descent in Salisbury. Okay. Lowe's Foods is owned by MDI, which is started by the George family in Hickory. So basically they grew fairly quickly. And the second generation become more professional. You see them go into law, into medicine, and so on and so forth. And they become very quickly established within practically every community that you can think of in North Carolina.
Right. Definitely making some very significant contributions, not only in North Carolina, but throughout the country. One thing that I noticed that was interesting to me in that clip was when Mitchell Mack was talking about the changing of the name, and that they were named by a clerk in Ellis Island. How, with things like that happening, how was the Lebanese community able to maintain its identity when you have these Americans making changes to things like your name, which is major?
Well, as we discovered in our research and from the interviews that we've done, there are really, if you will, three levels, three things that they use to maintain that sense of identity. One is family, two is community, and three is the church. Most of them were Catholics, close to about 90% were Catholic actually. And so what you find is a strong sense of family unit that was centered around the kitchen table. You know, the restaurant downtown called City, which is grandmother in Arabic, is owned by Greg Hatem, who descends from Lebanese heritage in Roanoke Rapids. So this notion of food, this idea that food maintains a sense of culture becomes important. Community organizations and visits was very central. And then church, they established some of the earliest Catholic churches in North Carolina, and they maintained them for a long time before they grew into sort of multicultural churches. And so all of these elements allowed them to remain, if you will, privately Lebanese, even as they embraced publicly being Americans.
Now, Caroline, part of your job has been reaching out to these community members and getting their stories. Talk a little bit about that experience and what that's been like.
Sure. So the base of the archive is really these oral histories, these oral testimonies. We went through, you know, sort of the channels that you go through when you're doing research. We went to archives, we went to libraries, we went to museums, and we found that the richest stories, the richest history really lied in the community itself. And so taking these oral histories and these oral testimonies was really the best way to capture what is the history of that very community, right? And so we oftentimes went into living rooms and kitchens, and we sat and we looked at photo albums, and we just recorded stories. And it was actually sort of simple, and in that way I think really profound. They opened up their lives to us for the benefit of this project, and of course for educational purposes, really to kind of educate a broad audience throughout the state. But the oral histories are very intimate encounters with how people live in North Carolina and the stories that they were told over generations about immigration, or the more recent immigrants, what it meant to come to North Carolina, to come to the United States.
Absolutely. We want to tell people again how they can find out more information about this project and all of the aspects of it. And they can go to the website nclebanese.org.
That is correct.
Okay. And they can certainly find out more information there. But you were talking about visiting with people and you know, just sitting at their kitchen tables, hearing stories. Are there any stories in particular that come to mind that may be particularly interesting to our viewers?
I can think of thousands of stories. They all sort of sit in my head. I was thinking of one earlier today about of a more recent immigrant. He came right after the Civil War broke out in Lebanon, and he said that he and his family, his parents told him that they were leaving the house only for a few hours, and they didn't return for the better part of a decade because of the Civil War, and they couldn't return back to their home. So and so sort of you think about that, and you think, you're giving us these photographs, you're telling us these stories. They've endured so much, you know. They thank you for giving us these photographs and these home videos. I think about that story a lot because I think it's very unique to the Lebanese community, but also very representative of a lot of immigrant communities in North Carolina.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a break. We'll continue our conversation in just a minute. Don't go away. Tarheel Talk will continue after these messages. Welcome back to Tarheel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. The Lebanese in North Carolina project was established in 2010 to research, preserve, and to publicize the history of Lebanese American community, both here in North Carolina and in the South. We've been getting some details on this project today from Dr. Akram Khater, director of the Khayrallah program for Lebanese American Studies at NC State, and Caroline Muglia, the program's assistant director. Now, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the documentary Cedars in the Pines, and we looked at one excerpt of that, and you brought along another. I want you to talk a little bit about what we're going to see, and then we can talk more about it afterwards.
Sure. The next clip features the Musa family, and they are more recent immigrants to North Carolina. And so they're just sort of talking about what it means to arrive in North Carolina and to sort of be part of a community here.
Okay, let's take a look at that clip.
They really saw that you've got to dress like the people here and speak like the people. You can go to church you want to. You can have what kind of food you want at home. You can dance a dubki. But you know, when you're out in public, you got to be seen as an American.
What Lebanese is to me, it really centers around my grandparents and what their values were and their faith and that sense of honor of being Lebanese.
It was to be expected. I mean, I knew I had to leave Lebanon eventually, whether it's for schooling or to make a living, you know. So it wasn't a big shock. The shock was the realization that you cannot go back to Lebanon anytime you want.
Living outside Lebanon for me is like taking a fish out of the water. Really, that's how I saw it. But I don't know, it seems like that fish have managed to survive for a long time outside the water.
I like that phrase, like a fish out of the water, and that I'm sure describes a lot of the feelings that many of the immigrants had coming over from Lebanon to the U.S. Did you all get any other stories talking about how difficult that transition was or how awkward it may have been?
Well, I think, especially with the more recent comers, of course, their memories are fresh. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that, as Caroline was alluding to earlier, this is a story not just about a particular ethnic group, but about immigrants in general. They leave a lot behind. You have to make a decision. You're leaving your family. You're leaving a way of life. You're leaving, you know, the smells, the sights, the roads that you know so well, mm-hmm. and you're going quite often to a place where not only do you not speak the language, but you don't know the ways of existence beyond possibly seeing a television show. And so in essence, you're arriving here and you're going already to feel marginalized. And so one of the biggest challenges for them is to how to integrate into the society, mm-hmm. Especially I think for later immigrants, again, as we alluded to earlier, because Arabs in general and the Lebanese, of course, as part of that, are looked upon a bit suspiciously. So I think there are a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. But I think what Caroline said is very true. What is remarkable is their determination. I mean, these are people that have taken a huge leap of faith in some ways, and they left all of that, but they're very determined to succeed. Mm-hmm. And what is remarkable is about practically everybody we interviewed has done very well in this country through hard work and through creating a sense of community.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the future plans. We have about a minute and a half left in the show. What's on the horizon for this project?
What's not on the horizon? A museum exhibit is on the horizon, is the sort of short answer. We're working with the North Carolina Museum of History and Excellent. North Carolina State University. This project has been collaborative from the very start with the community, the Lebanese American community, but also the larger community in North Carolina. And so we're working with the North Carolina Museum of History, the Computer Science Department at North Carolina State, the History Department at State, the Graphic Design Department at State, mm-hmm. and we are creating an interactive museum exhibit that, again, chronicles the history of the Lebanese community from the 1880s all the way until today. So it'll be a project that is meant for school-age students and then adults. There'll be interactive census maps, so to have a real understanding of the journey, as Akram was saying, but then also sort of real-life examples. How does the Lebanese community impact life in North Carolina? Do you know about this? Well, that actually was a Lebanese community member that did
Absolutely.
that.
And I'm sure you're also welcome and welcome to take news stories as well. If you have other people who may be interested, we want to let people know that they can find out more information by going to nclebanese.org. I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to share this work with us, and thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you for having us.
That's it for this week's Tarheel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, send us a message on our Facebook page or an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week.